Okay, so what does it mean to truly belong in a world where your language becomes a barrier? Today, we are examining Eva Hoffman's poignant memoir, Lost in Translation: A Life in a New Language, and it's a journey of identity, exile, and the profound power of words. So, Eva Hoffman splits her memoir, Lost in Translation: A Life in a New Language, into three sections. The first, Paradise, is concerned with her upbringing and childhood in Poland. The second, Exile, describes her family's immigration and attempts to build a new life in Canada. And finally, the third section, The New World, relates her experiences as she graduates from university and begins a path to becoming a public intellectual in America. As the title suggests, her memoir addresses the issue of what happens to an individual's language when they change country. Hoffman uses her experience as an immigrant to discuss language, culture, memory, and perception, and how she has struggled with them at various junctures in her life. Throughout her journey, she reveals how social, personal, and enacted identity can conflict as she attempts to assimilate in Canada and then later in America. She also describes the key importance of language as she tries to negotiate a new identity and goes on to reveal how important language is in terms of ethnic and racial relations. Throughout the narrative, Hoffman draws on her own vividly detailed memories as well as her parents' recollections to give the reader access to her experiences. She was born in Krakow, Poland in 1945, just 2 months after the war ended. As Polish Jews, her parents had barely survived the Holocaust by seeking refuge with a variety of peasants and farmers and hiding in the Ukrainian countryside. On several occasions, her parents were betrayed by some of these people and only survived due to the self sacrifice of others. Despite these turbulent circumstances surrounding her birth, she recounts what is essentially an idyllic middle class childhood in Krakow, learning to ride a bike, her father teaching her to swim by throwing her in a lake, and her first youthful infatuation with a local boy. Indeed, her memories of this childhood are so strong that they exert a powerful hold on her well into her adult life. I didn't know I was economically deprived. There were so many things that are important for a child. There was a sense of community and solidarity and neighborliness because of the terrible times that everyone had been through. The barriers were lower between people, and as a child, I was not overstimulated. There was human intimacy, but also a lot of space to muse, to play, and to imagine. She writes that as a child, she developed an early love for literature and was keenly aware of experiencing the world around her through language. I love words insofar as they correspond to the world, insofar as they give it to me in a heightened form. The more words I have, the more distinct, precise my perceptions become, and such lucidity is a form of joy. This attachment to language is what at first makes her transition to a new country so difficult, but it later makes her life such an insightful observer. Later in her life, it makes her such an insightful observer of the molding tendencies language can possess. Hold on. In the second part of her memoir, Exile, she discusses her new life in Canada. She reveals how the experience of exile and the loss of language caused her childhood memories to constantly resurface in her present moment. She feels as if her Polish life, language, and self are just below the surface of her new life. This distance allows her to eventually identify the different possible ways of living she encounters and gives her a sustained interest in how the individual is constructed by language and culture. She writes that there is some kind of dialectic going on, but we can never grasp what it is that engages with language. At first, as a teenager and then a young woman in a new country, she only recognizes it in her own life, but soon she observes the process of construction through language and culture everywhere. That language and identity are inextricably linked becomes at times almost painfully apparent for Hoffman. She describes the loss of her language as the loss of living connection. At one point, she explains, the problem is that the signifier has become severed from the signified. The words I learn now don't stand for things in the same unquestioned way they did in my native tongue. Severed from a history of childhood memories, the new words she learns have no accumulated associations and therefore no power to evoke. When she turns 19, Hoffman makes a momentous life decision. She accepts a scholarship to study literature at Rice University in Texas, 2,000 miles away from her family's new home in Canada. It was another planet, she says. Here, she is puzzled and alienated by the seemingly arcane rituals American adolescents engage in, particularly in dating and romantic relationships. Nevertheless, she persists in trying to engage with American culture. Regarding her studies, she initially feels that much of what I read is lost on me because I have so little language. However, she quickly realizes that this apparent handicap has compensations, and these compensations enable her to achieve academically. The lack of language, she laments, actually means that in my head, there is no ongoing daily monologue to distract me, no layers of verbal filigree to peel away before the skeleton of an argument can become clear. With her outsider perspective, she develops an ability to make careful and precise observations about her new culture. Despite continued academic success and an ever growing facility with her second language, a deeper frustration remains to haunt her. A sense of melancholy and loss is never far away, often returning when she thinks of her Polish childhood, the memories of which will make her new life seem a dark and empty state. The picture and word show have gone, she says, and at times it seems this lack will never be filled or compensated for. Upon graduation, she moves even further from her family to continue studying at Harvard. Here, she experiences the growing counterculture, changes her name, and gets married. As she accumulates these new life experiences and time passes, an interesting development occurs. She finally feels as if her second language has become an internalized, intrinsic part of her consciousness. I crack the last barrier between myself and the language, the barrier I sensed but couldn't get through. She has an epiphany in which she realizes that words have again become, as they were in childhood, beautiful things. Enough time has passed, and she has accrued enough life experiences that words, as they were in her childhood, have shades and complexities of meaning and emotional resonance. She begins to think of herself as a fully translated person, whilst at the same time recognizing that it is impossible to regain the sense of unity she had in childhood. Experience creates style, and style in turn creates a new woman. Polish is no longer the one true language. The tiny gap, she says, can never be fully closed, but nevertheless, she allows English to play an increasingly important role in her emotional life. In the final words of her memoir, Hoffman writes that the language of this is sufficient. I am here now. She has reconciled her identity with her language, and her journey is, she says, at an end. For teachers of the English language, the journey Hoffman recounts in her memoir is significant in a variety of ways, not least because it highlights how fundamental language is to identity. Language is inextricably linked to personal experience. Hoffman's journey towards becoming a fully translated person, as she says, reveals that our experience of the world and how we interpret it is mediated, of course, through language, a fact we may in some ways not be aware of until we are forced or choose to learn another. At a young age, Hoffman realized that the more language she had, the richer her experience of the world around her would be. This is a key point for the teacher of second languages to remember. The goal is not to teach language as such, but to give students the tools to experience the richness of their world through a language that is not their own. This is what Eva Hoffman's journey tells us. So, have you ever experienced a moment when language felt like both a bridge and a barrier? What role does language play in your own identity? Do you think it's possible to fully integrate into a new culture while retaining your original language? And after hearing about Hoffman's journey, how do you view the relationship between language and memory? I'd love to know your thoughts. Thanks for listening or watching so far, and see you next time.